And back live once again on the 1330 WFIN Facebook page. I'm News Director Doug Jenkins. Aaron Heilers is with me. He's the project manager for Blanchard River Demonstration Farms. Yes, I just read that off his shirt. I've been interviewing a lot of people today. Aaron, you talked about a lot of different ways to keep phosphorus from running off of fields today. We'll go back to the long and short of it. Certainly this has been an issue that people have been focusing on ever since the Toledo water crisis from a few years ago. Farmers have gotten a lot of the blame, and we'll get into whether or not that's deserved or not, but there's a lot being done on farms to try and prevent further runoff.
Yeah, so if we kind of start from the beginning here, the demonstration farms is a project set up to try to help facilitate that message of what agriculture is doing in terms of keeping nutrients on the landscape. Part of that is the edge of field monitoring equipment that is operated by USDA Ag Research Service. Two of our three farms are outfitted with that information or that monitoring equipment, and the information that we gather from that equipment is what we can utilize to help tell farmers and show them which practices are making a positive impact on water quality.
So we saw information on a few different techniques to keep phosphorus in the fields, which is what farmers want. And you talked about that. People don't want that coming off the field. They're paying for that in a lot of instances.
Yes. Really what's coming down to is making sure that every farmer's practicing the 4 R's. So the right rate, the right source, the right time, and the right placement of their nutrient application. We've got to get farmers to make sure that they're taking soil samples and then utilizing that information to make the right application of whatever nutrient they're applying out on the field. That's one of the biggest things we can do to help save nutrients from leaving.
And when we talk about these reduction methods, a lot of times we get into what's the cost going to be on that. And it seemed like the soil sample might be the most cost-effective way to manage some of this, because I don't think anybody wants to be putting phosphorus down where they already have a pretty good concentration in their soil.
Yeah, so depending on the level of soil sampling that you're doing, it can cost $5 to $10 per acre to sample. But that information is valuable because then it tells you what parts of the field don't need any fertilizer, what parts do. Maybe they need more in certain areas. And so as a farmer, then you can come in and make the right application in the right part of the field. Maybe save money in the long run because you're putting less fertilizer out there, but you're putting it in the right spot. And that's really what the first part of the message is putting fertilizer in the right spot.
So we're out here at Kurt Farms just south of Dunkirk, and they are one of the test farms for some of these methods. What are some of the things that they're utilizing here, and what have you found from the information you've gathered thus far?
So here on this particular farm, we haven't made any changes yet. We're still in the baseline collection period. So after this cropping cycle, next year, Chris is going to switch to continuous no-till of his corn and beans, and then also variable rate fertilizer application. So as I was saying again, putting it in the right spot in the field. Dr. Kevin King, who does the edge of field monitoring around the state, his other fields are into that implementation phase. And so what we're finding is those practices, whether it's cover crop utilization, placement of fertilizer below ground, those type of things is where we're starting to differentiate of what practice makes a difference.
We've heard a lot about no-till or conservation tilling for a long time, and that goes to soil health and that type of thing. But one of the drawbacks is it doesn't hold the phosphorus quite as well. So what are the ways to get the fertilizer into the ground better if you're doing that type of tilling?
Yeah, so you can, if you're a true no-tiller, you're broadcasting your commercial fertilizer on top of the ground, and it's subject to these rainfall events that we've been getting. So it's subject to leach off of the landscape during times of the year. So what we're trying to get producers to is getting that fertilizer placed below the ground. If it's a couple inches or maybe 5 or 6 inches deep, there's a couple different methods that you can do that with. One of our demonstration farmers does strip tillage, so it's basically tilling 9-inch bands in the soil and placing the fertilizer within that. Other mechanisms that are coming are just a single coulter going across the field that slices the ground and blows the fertilizer down without doing a lot of disturbance. So we're really trying to test those different things and see economically what the best impact is going to be. But we know from a water quality perspective that placing that fertilizer below ground, can save up to 70% of nutrients from leaving the farm field. So that's a significant reduction. We just have to make it viable for the farmer to implement that change.
That seems to be the trick. Any word on how that can be implemented in the future? Because that, when we're talking about it, it's about 40 cents is worth of phosphorus is what you're looking to capture from coming off the field, and the implementation is costing far more than that. So how do we find a middle ground there?
Yeah, based on the monitoring again, we're seeing on average about 1 pound of phosphorus loss per acre across the western Lake Erie Basin. So that pound of phosphorus is roughly 30 to 40 cents that we're trying to save from leaving the landscape, but we're asking farmers to implement practices that cost hundreds to thousands of dollars to maybe a couple $100,000. And so we have to make sure that the economics line up for that farmer to make that change. Maybe by implementing a couple $100,000 management change on his piece of equipment, maybe he can save fertilizer that he's applying in the long run and save that cost back. So we really are trying to look at all aspects of this problem because yes, we've got a nutrient issue going in the western Lake Erie Basin, but there's not one practice that we can just snap our fingers and make the change overnight.
Is part of the issue with the Lake Erie Basin, it's just how broad it is and how much of the Lake Erie Basin is dedicated to farmland. It's quite a bit. So when you talk about 1 acre, that's not so much, but it does start to add up. So these little 40% reductions could add up as well.
Yeah, one pound of phosphorus across 4 million acres is 4 million pounds of phosphorus. So that's a big number, and we say those numbers not to say that farmers don't have things that they can do. It's just to try to wrap our heads around what we're up against from the agricultural side of things, that it's a challenge to be able to reduce that small amount of nutrients that's leaving our farm field.
I think the overall takeaway, though, from your presentation today, though, is that the agriculture industry, they are taking heed of these issues, and maybe have been even since before we knew they were issues, just simply because the cost of phosphorus went up. That got the ball rolling, but there's a lot of practices being implemented that are helping bring that number down already.
Yeah, absolutely. As I talked about out there with the edge of field equipment, commodity organizations, the Ohio Farm Bureau, NRCS, environmental organizations are putting money into that type of equipment. NRCS and Ohio Department of Agriculture are putting cost share dollars out there for farmers to make changes. All these entities are coming together to try to make an impact and make a positive impact on downstream water quality. So it is truly a collaborative effort.
All right, Aaron, we appreciate your time with us here today. Thank you for the presentation, and we'll talk to you later.
All right, thank you very much.
All right, that will conclude our farm tour in Hardin County. We even dipped into Union County today, but we learned a lot about the agriculture in our industry. If you missed any of those videos, just scroll down the Facebook page. They're sitting there for you. You can learn about the wine industry in Ohio. You can learn about the pork industry in Ohio, and even the dairy industry. A lot of interesting information today, all right on the WFIN Facebook page. We appreciate you tuning in today.